Edumacated. Edumacated. School systems at work. Education. What's up, gamers? This is Jim from Just Push Play here, Ottawa's video game web show, and today I'm doing a really late webcast. Done a lot of research. I've read a lot of articles. As you know, I went over the last time that I spoke on Monday night. It's Friday slash Saturday, Friday evening or Saturday morning, early Saturday morning, however you want to see it. But I've been wanting to do this one in particular for a few days. Unfortunately, a lot of things have come up along the way, and yeah, this is the only time I've managed to fit it in. There's been a lot of editing of video game footage, which is, that's always awesome. But at the same time, that's very time consuming. So that means, you can only accomplish a certain amount, and you can't get as much as you'd like done. And then arranging new events. So yeah, what I want to talk about today, uh, it won't probably take too long, but I just want to, it really bothers me going back to sort of like the days of Mortal Kombat, back when everyone was concerned about blood and like, is this pushing the envelope too far? And politicians, asking for games to be banned, and this is not anything new. Grand Theft Auto, every single time it comes out, or whenever there's a controversial game, just like what's a good example? I'm thinking Blood. I think it was called Blood. That was another big game. Well, big game. A really controversial game. Postal, that was another one. Again, Mortal Kombat, as I said. So, these games always, there's always a game that comes along and, it just pushes the envelope further. And especially with Grand Theft Auto, the hot coffee that was hidden away and um, in San Andreas, that sort of pushed the envelope of and shocked people because they thought, okay, and that's actually, I should mention that right now. Everyone has that perception video games are for kids, and it's such a I find it's a burden for gamers because video games aren't just for kids. People need to realize that, and the more people that speak up and say, I'm 20, I still play video games, and they make, the more it becomes mainstream, the more it becomes like, oh, that guy's pretty cool. He actually has this game, and I think it's disappointing that we live in a society where video games are sort of still viewed as kids toys, even though that certain games kids definitely either should not play, or they just wouldn't have the um, you know the emotional maturity, or the strategy involved. Like, there are some games that kids just would not want to play because of those reasons. So anyways, yeah, I do want to talk about Grand Theft Auto, not necessarily just number 5, but an overarching theme of how it seems to be a scapegoat for video game violence. So I want to talk about that. I've done a lot of notes just for today's webcast. So anyways, I want to get straight to it. So anyways, I saw a video a few days ago, and I didn't have the time to watch it at the time, so now I went back and read the article about an 11-year-old that received Grand Theft Auto 5 early in France, apparently. In the video, I saw a clip, like the actual image, and the boy is crying with presumed happiness. Grand Theft Auto is rated M for a reason. This kid shouldn't have um, access to this game. That's my personal opinion, but I mean, that's why we have the rating boards. Like, why have the ratings at all, the ESRB, and then Japan has their own system? Like, why do we bother with these systems if we're not going to enforce them? It's just basic common sense. I don't know why they're not enforced stronger. Grand Theft Auto, it's got guns, it's got people, drive over other people with cars. You know, Grand Theft Auto, obviously you're stealing cars. It's got hookers, and like you can jump in the back seat and, you know, do your monkey business, and extreme violence, and you know there's themes and swearing, and like, you know, that's not necessarily behavior that you would see. Like some of the stuff you see in these games, they're dramatized, you know. It's like Bold and the Restless for video games, or you know, the Restless, I mean, uh you can tell I don't watch soaps, but I mean there's a reason why those, they are to entertain. They're not necessarily how, like a role model. I mean, video games aren't supposed to be a role model. They're not supposed to be a role model substitute, which I think is another thing that needs to be remembered, for sure. You know, that's what your parents are for. That's what, you know, hopefully your friends are good role models, and hopefully your teachers, um, you know, relatives, neighbors, you know, and so on. Like, I mean, it's, video games aren't supposed to be people or life substitutes, and people need to realize that. Parents need to realize that. Um, I'm not sure if I want to go too much more on that, but yeah, these games are rated that way to prevent kids from being influenced by you know, subject matter that they cannot comprehend at that age. You know, they're too young for these games. That's why they're rated that way. You know, they lack the experiences needed. And again, going at what I said before, they're not emotionally mature enough to be playing these games. That's why they have a rating on them. So this seems to be, this was my next point. It seems to be a common occurrence. It really saddens me because I used to work for EB Games, and I saw parents, you know, they're so shrugged off. They see the cartoonish nature of Grand Theft Auto on the front jacket of the game, and I think, oh, it's just a cartoon. Like, or, you know, they don't even know anything about games, or like what they're buying. Like, I mean, would you, like buy like a chocolate bar with like no wrapping, and like just put it in your mouth and chew on it? Like, I don't know. It just seems like people go into certain situations blindfolded. They don't want to do any research. Maybe they just don't want to think. I don't know, but it's weird. It's weird to see that, to me, for me to think that people want to go around like that, and like they think that you know, they'll be unaffected by whatever they read or whatever they see. They think, oh, I'm strong enough. I don't know what the thinking is behind that, but I mean, it's strange. As I said, it's a common occurrence. I've actually warned parents, okay, are you sure this has all these suggestive themes, you know, sexuality? Kids shouldn't really know about that too young, you know, 17, you know, or teach them a little bit before. But I mean, teach them, don't have the game teach them these experiences and other things. So I find that sad that I've seen that EV Games, having worked there, and also seen it when I've gone in just to buy games. You know, the kids have games, or parents buy them games that they shouldn't actually be, you know, playing, because it's not a good influence necessarily. It's not a substitute, as I said, for, you know, other role models or experiences, and they're not quite ready for it. So, anyways, um, yeah, so it's a pretty common occurrence, as I wrote here, and we should all be concerned about it because, you know, the obviously kids, as it's said every once in a while, kids are the future, and if you let kids go around, you know, playing games or watching movies that they shouldn't be watching, or, you know, I'm not sure if they really grow up fast. I know some people say that, but I think more like they don't grow up properly is how I see it personally. They don't, you know, this is not what they're intended you know, consume, uh, or watch. They're not quite ready, is my opinion. Um, so anyways, Grand Theft Auto 5 earned over 800 million in a single day, so we'll put that in context. New high for the series, and Take-Two Interactive. The news, I think it was today or yesterday, uh, it's since earned over $1 billion in sales. So obviously, you know, their formula that they're doing, they're following, with some deviations, it's working. You know, it's selling their game. It's probably one of the largest gaming series right now. I'm not sure if it's, as I said, it was the new high for the series and Take-Two. Um, it might be the biggest, I think it said in the article I read, the biggest item for a product ever, too. And I know the last game, Grand Theft Auto 4, was um, like the even bigger than like the mo even more successful than the biggest movie you can imagine. So I mean that's pretty impressive. Um, so yeah, the retailers aren't allowed to sell these games to youths. Going back to that, um, but they're allowed to younger than the game's rating values, but they're allowed to if the parent or guardian says they are. But as I said, the parent or guardian usually isn't aware of what is actually in the game. And I've seen my coworker back when I was at EB Games say, sexual themes, all that. Even though that was said, the parents would just like shrug it off, like, yeah, yeah, yeah. He's already got the previous one at home. And I'm like, why does he have, or she, usually he though, has the previous game, or I think I remember even this was 7 years ago, when the customer said, "Oh yeah, he like plays it with his dad or something." I was like, "What?" This kid was like, I've seen kids that are 7 or 8 playing Grand Theft Auto, and it blows my mind because back then I was playing like Nintendo games, and there was nothing like that back then when I was growing up. So, I mean, it's kind of a stretch to see kids, half my age playing something that's even more violent and brutal. Um, I find that a little bit unnerving. I wouldn't say it's scary, but I just find it, a little bit shocking. Um, so yeah, so in 3 days, as I said, I heard the news that Grand Theft Auto's passed $1 billion of sales. Now, I also wanted to relate that to other articles I saw. Now, there are a lot of articles that talk about video games causing violence, or causing violence, I mean, and causing people to be violent. And a lot of them are either, yay or nay, saying, yes, they definitely do cause violence, or no, there's no proof. Or generally, from the research I've done, either um, there is a correlation, which is not causation. Now, a lot of these articles are written by, Joe Schmo that doesn't really have any knowledge and doesn't understand the difference between correlation and causation. There's a huge difference between those two. Correlation means that it's linked as a factor. So video games, um, there could be another factor in there, but they do say, um, but that's not the same as causation. Causation means it's a sort of like a direct cause. Correlation sort of says it could be a factor, it could be one of a few factors, but it they can't they teach you at university, as they taught me, you can't jump to conclusions like that. You can say it suggests that, there's a link, or there could be an increase in violence, but it's so rare. I think I would have this point later, but it's so rare to have like a perfect causation because there's just so many factors. And when you're doing an experiment in a unreal environment, like non-field, enclosed environment, that's the right way of saying it. It's not the same as if you're out in the, actually out, um, outside of the lab. That's the right way of saying it. It's not the same thing. You'll get a very different result. There's been so many studies where the results have been completely different. And that's why, if you don't have this knowledge, the background, if you haven't gone to college or university, um, it's so easy to jump to conclusions, just like it seems like all these articles I've been seeing about Grand Theft Auto, um, that are just written by, the rag newspaper, they don't have that sort of knowledge, or they haven't done any research. They just jump on the bandwagon and say video games are bad, blah 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 blah. So yeah, so you know, the studies show with gaming that it doesn't make a gamer any more, aggressive than if they had like um any had seen any form of violence on TV. It's pretty much the same. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, but there's an increase in being, sort of behave a bit more violent. But I mean, there's nothing saying, oh, TV causes someone to go and become an axe murderer, because it's not true. They never would say that, unless they have, these articles, the journalists that, or Joe Schmo that hasn't done any research and just spouting off their opinions. So yeah, it's really important to keep that in mind, that a lot of the people writing these articles, they don't have any background, they don't have any really merit to what they're talking about. They're just spewing out what they either what they think people want to hear or what they just assume is right, but they haven't checked the scientific studies. And we'll talk about that a bit more. Um, so yeah, usually it's only led to a slight to moderate increase in aggression or violence. It's not made everyone a serial murderer or anything. So it's really, this bothers me, and it's always bothered me that it's really irresponsible of journalists to do this. And um, journalists can do this. There are some good journalists, but I mean, they, you know, they, there's some. It mentions that there are some medical and psychological associations that chime in on causation, but really, um, it's you can't really say causation. It's such a there's so many factors, as I said. You can't just say, oh, this causes this. They really emphasize at university and probably at college that you can't jump like that. You can say it suggests this, or these results indicate, but you don't know that they do cause. And it irks me and gets my back up when I see, you know, journalists, or you see these articles and it's like, what? How did you get that? And like, you're probably following an agenda rather than what the research is actually out there. Um, but I'll elaborate a bit more. Yeah, so in one of the articles I saw, it said absolute causation, and in these articles, and you know, they, I was always taught there's no way that you can say that. Um, in my years of education, pretty much in the textbooks, every single textbook I've read for my degree in my working towards psychology or sociology, they say absolute causation never happens. They say never happens because it's so rare. It's like 95%. I'm just throwing a number out to give you a general idea. It's like 95 to almost 100%, never happens. Like there's still that chance, maybe like 98% unlikely, but it's so rare to have like this causes this. It's never that simple. Life isn't that simple, so this, keep that in mind. Um, yeah, and again, violent video games, they may cause increased levels of aggression in individuals, but how many people are you seeing going around shooting other people, um, you know, in large groups? Especially in Ottawa. Let's use Ottawa. Like, how many people are shooting? How many shootings we have? I think we had 8 homicides. Let's see how I'm doing for time. Okay, 8 homicides here in Ottawa so far in 2013. They found an unfortunate lady the other day. So that's, 8 people killed. Think of how many people are in Ottawa. Um, what is it? What's the number? I could be way wrong. But let's just say 30,000 people living in an area, and you have 8 deaths from homicide. That's really low. If you put it in that context of like how many people are in all of Ottawa, is it? I'm not sure if I got the numbers way off there, but I mean even 30,000, like 8 people murdered in one year. and you think of how many people like move in and move out, and like how many kids are born, and it's just 8 people. That's really low. So um but yeah, the number, as I said, very few people are going around shooting people. The stat I've actually seen in the USA, I don't know what the stat is in Canada, because from my experiences of doing research, certain areas in Canada lack the data for to do um, a study, or you pretty much have to start from scratch depending on what sort of study you're trying to do. But from what I've seen out of the entire USA, number of serial killers that are loose at any given time, for what I've heard, is 50. You know, that is the estimated number of serial killers out there. But the media will make it into such a big deal and say, oh, hide up your wives, make sure you're super safe. We're pretty safe here in Ottawa. I mean, I wouldn't say like unlock your doors and, you know, give out your key to people and just let them stay over whenever they like. But I mean, we're pretty safe here in Ottawa. Um, as long as you're smart about it. So anyways, that I don't want to spend. There's a lot to cover, so I don't want to spend too much on that. But the speculation is, here we go. The speculation is violent people are attracted to extreme forms of violent acts of interest. So, from all the research I've read, that's what it seems to be speculated or suggested or indicated. It's not that. So it's sort of. I used to know someone that was. He wasn't a friend of mine, but growing up, he was actually like um, mutilating cockroaches, and that's apparently what serial killers and people that are very violent do. As they're growing up, before they ever do like hurt other people, usually they hurt animals and like insects. So it was kind of weird to see this guy that was very very weird behavior, just sort of out of control, didn't do his schoolwork, kind of smelled sometimes. I don't know what happened to him. I only saw him. I think from what I remember, I think he got, um, moved about. I think his parents like were divorced or didn't get along or something. So sadly, he seemed like, I wouldn't be surprised if he did have like some sort of, mental condition, and maybe he did not, maybe he didn't turn out too well. I don't know, but like all those factors, just from the studies, it generally sounds like he might have had a problem or two or a few. But I mean, that's the speculation. If you're likely to do something like that, hurting, creatures and other things, you probably do have some sort of problem. So, anyways, if you have, what people need to realize is, if you have a mentally ill person who is like incapable of understanding the difference between, video game violence and real world violence, you have a problem, or they have a problem rather. I guess shouldn't have read that verbatim. But yeah, if they can't tell the difference of what happens in real life or what should happen in real life, then you know you may want to watch your back, because they don't realize what is acceptable behavior, and they might just snap. If they're mentally fragile, you don't know. Um, but yeah, that sort of leads up to the example that happened, on Monday actually in the United States. I missed it, of course, unfortunately, I mean, rather, but um, there was a massacre on Monday. I missed it because I was I think I was at work, and I'm very busy day to day. But the example was of Aaron Alexis and the shooting of the Washington Navy Yard. It seemed to sort of suggest what I was talking about. Had a problem, weird behavior. He had a history of mental illness. They didn't say what in the article I saw. I mean, His friends described him as having, spending hours and hours playing violent video games. Um, and again, I repeat, just because there's a link between video games and increased aggression does not mean that uh, that link does not also exist in other areas. Like if you're competing in sports or other events that involve competition, that's gonna make you more aggressive too. If your testosterone levels are higher, that doesn't mean that you're gonna go out and kill someone. People need to realize that just because you're likely to be more violent from watching a violent film, um, from what I've read and with the research, it's a temporary thing. It's not necessarily long term. And it also depends on your emotional maturity again. So, anyways, um, yeah, so it seems like, from all these killings that have taken place, and um, the shooters of the example here is Columbine, or that's later, but it seems like it's only a select few that should go out and commit a crime like this. It's not everyone, like, it's not myself or, someone down the end of the block. Like, there wouldn't be many people in Barhaven if it was everyone doing that. I mean, it's only a select few, um, but that are affected by video game violence. So to commit all these multiple homicides or rampages, um, it hardly seems fair is my next point, that for the, industry or, for people to scapegoat video games and not other forms of media, movies. Whatnot. I know movies have been scapegoat, but video games being a relatively new form of media, it's easier for people to blame them. And if they don't have people that are vocal about it, kids, how are kids going to compete against Fox News to protest it? It's a lot harder. I mean, you really need to file a complaint or something, or get people that play video games working at Fox News or wherever, there's a problem, with perception. Um, yeah, but yeah, it's also, it could be society's values. That was my next point. If you have people that value winning over, being honorable or, having fun or whatever, that's society's values. That's a fault more than anything. Or C, this is the big one that bothered me, is the failure to strictly enforce the ESRB's rating system for all consumers. That one really bothers me because I don't think kids should be playing these games too early. It's not safe for them. It's not safe for society because who knows if they get the wrong impression and wrong ideas. Um, yeah, so since all these articles that I mentioned, they're really similar. They're either pro, video games or against, opposed to video games. Um, a lot of them are poorly researched, and it really bothers me because I don't see people saying this, and people should say this, that, these articles are written by, like, you do see some people say, like, I was happy to see that people were saying, this is nonsense. Like, it's great to see people saying that, saying, this is all garbage, this looks like you can tell if it's not being cited properly. If the sources haven't been cited properly, then yeah, of course it's garbage. I mean, that these articles usually don't have proper citations, and they don't mention you know, the organizations or associations that, you know, um, that they can't back themselves up. They really can't. It's silly why people should just automatically assume. Like, I think people should think for themselves, and if they automatically blindly believe it, then that's their fault. They I wouldn't say they deserve to be fooled, but I think it's a huge mistake to automatically believe just because it's written in a paper that's got to be 100% true. Um, yeah, and people should do, not only the journalists should conduct good research, but the people reading should use critical thinking. It's really important. So, anyways, that's all that really needs to be said on that. But another article that I saw, and I think I saw on Kotaku. I'm not sure if it was Joystick or Kotaku. There's usually overlap, but I'm pretty sure it was Kotaku. It talks about Fox and Friends, which is a show that's on Fox News. And they talked about the U.S. Navy massacre in Washington and analyzed it. The co-host Brian Kilmeade, he said about the 34-year-old Aaron Alexis had a history of drinking, video games, and using guns. Now, they also said he would play video games so long that he would have his friends would have to serve him dinner and feed him as he continued playing. Well, that's just sad. I mean, if you can't take a break, like I understand, I play BioShock. I know the game is addictive, or can be addictive for some people. I've known a few people that have to keep on playing until they beat the game, like 8, 9 hours later. But I mean, for me, I just, you have bodily functions you have to do. You have to eat. All that. Like, I just don't know how people can do that. It's not good for your bladder. It's not good for anything. Like, in the day on. Yeah, so it's not good for it's not good for your brain not to get sleep as I'm doing right now. But I really want to finish this. Um, kind of um, yeah. So it's not good to postpone everything for long periods of time just for video games. I mean, everything in moderation. Don't go all out and then finish Grand Theft Auto in like 2 hours or whatever. It don't. There's gotta be like you gotta be smart about it, right? Not like it's like anything done in such an extreme, and it seemed like this person was, you know, drinking, as I said, video games, using guns. Like, okay, I understand some people like to use guns for like a sense of power or something, but I mean, um, but yeah, one of the lady on this Fox and Friends show, morning show, it seems to be Elizabeth Back, Hasselback, asked if mental conditions could be susceptible um, to have a more negative reaction from. So if you have like a mental illness or something, would that lead to a negative reaction from playing violent video games? Well, you know, if you're not well in the first place and you play a video game and you think that's real life, then of course, it seemed like sort of like, well, of course, you're gonna have problems. If you already have problems and then you play a video game and then you start thinking, oh, maybe I should buy a gun, and like, if you start getting ideas and you get weird and you're already weird and like you're not well and you don't understand what is proper social discourse, then of course, you're not gonna behave rashly. So, maybe um she actually said, you might have a more negative reaction from playing video games. Well, of course, you don't understand the world, how it's set up, or you don't understand, um, a lot of things may not that you perceive may not be, closer to reality for everyone else. I mean, what is accepted as normal, like normal behavior or whatnot. So, Um, she asked whether it was going to be like 20 or 34-year-old men as being more susceptible. Well, I'm not sure if this is sexist, but it's sort of weird that, like, why would it necessarily just be men? That's what bothered me. I watched the video. I'm gonna post a link too, but I mean, so you can watch and read the articles that I've read, and you can reply back and see what you think. But I mean, it's more than just that. It's, guys, um, it depends on people's upbringing. Like, it's not just the age, it's not just guys. Guys and girls both go to prison. So it shouldn't just be like, oh, are guys like in 20 to 34? No, it's more like, how you were raised and like your attitudes and everything. So it's kind of weird, and I think offensive even for her to say it's just guys, because women and men both, get in trouble. It's not just men. Um, and I wouldn't say that age group is a good idea anyways, because even though, there are older video gamers, I think, it's the younger guys that, from what I've seen in the research, it's the younger guys that go out and stay up later. See, I'm a younger guy, so I'm up here doing up late, I mean, making this, webcast. But they're also more likely, as you're younger, you're more likely to go out and go to clubs and all that. So, that's a fact that I know from um, all my readings that most people wouldn't know. Once you get past the age of 25, you're far less likely to commit a crime. That those are the stats. That's the reality. And when you have Fox News or anywhere else saying, trying to scare you, um, and the reality is after you're 25, it's really unlikely for you to commit a major crime at all. That's just the stats. So I mean, so yeah, as I said earlier, they listed the mass shooters who played video games. I think that's kind of silly because, a lot of people don't kill and they play video games and they have a blast and they play with their 3-year-olds or 5-year-olds and, like, they never commit a crime. So it just, video games is used as a scapegoat and it shouldn't be. There could be other media that, or other factors, just the fact that they all play video games, it's a link, but I mean, it's not necessarily a defining link. Excuse me, it could be more like they're already violent, so that's what they lean them towards. What they didn't say is that they were also, not they don't always say that they also were leaning towards, owning guns, firing guns, doing that usually, every once in a while, depending on the individual. So it could be that, they're attracted to violence, so that's why video games allows them to do it without costing them, money if they have to buy bullets or whatever. There's all these other factors they need to factor in and think about and use critical thinking. So, yeah, yeah, they mentioned the Columbine shooters, they mentioned the Dark Knight Rises shooter, James Holmes, Norwegian shooter, Anders Breivik. Again, Hasselback, yeah, Hasselback, uh, the woman on the show suggested, um, sort of having a national video gamer registry, and I think, that's just scary, and I don't see how that would really do anything. I mean, there would be so many people on the registry list compared to, like, say, a national gun list, um, registry. Like in Canada, I think there are fewer guns than in America. So if you had that in America, it would cost a ton of money on upkeep, so much more than in Canada if we had it implemented here. And it's just like totally unrealistic, and I think it would be totally unnecessary. I don't think it would make people any safer. I mean, get rid of the guns is how I see it, and then you'll make the area much safer, or rather than getting people on a list. Because, like, if you have people that are buying games on a list, here we go, drop that now. If you have people buying games on list, and what she suggested is frequency, like frequency testing, like how often is a game being played for? Well, how are you gonna monitor that? Like, really, like, I'm sure it sounded great as she said it, or whether she thought it out. But I mean, how are you gonna monitor how long someone's playing a game, and who's gonna do this? Like, what part of the government is going to monitor all this, and like the frequencies of purchases per person? So if someone buys 3 copies of, like, Batman, is that making them a criminal? Like, it seemed like a frequency of purchases of fighting games. Like, just because you play fighting games doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be violent. I mean, if you're spending your weekend playing fighting games instead of going to the shooting range or wherever, or you're staying out of trouble, aren't you? So that's what I don't understand about this. How often they are playing? Well, I mean, I know a lot of people that play video games a lot, and I mean, usually they do it in groups because most people, I would assume, I haven't seen any stats on it, but I assume most people would play video games in groups. Uh, at least back in the day they did. Now with Xbox Live, it's harder to say whether that's true or not. But I know some people that say that they give up their TV time to play video games. Some people that play 4 to 8 hours a day. Some people play 40 hours a week. So it really does vary. But I mean, I really would find it hard to believe that someone that plays like 20 to 40 hours a week gaming would have the want to plan out a shooting. Oh, excuse me, a shooting or anything. I mean, it just boggles my mind. I just don't see how the frequency that you're playing video games means that you're likely going to go shoot at someone or anything. Like it just doesn't make sense. And then they talked about oh, oh they talked about timing out after a certain hour. So I think she was trying to say, Hasselbeck was trying to say, well, if they game like for 40 minutes and then they take like a 15-minute break, they're probably less likely to kill someone. I don't know. I really doubt that has, any relevance. I mean, if you play like 10 hours straight, I know some people that do that, and then, they're pretty sociable, or at least they're pretty talkative. And I mean, I don't think that they've killed anyone. I find it hard to believe. So anyways, the possible solutions, I thought sort of covered it a little bit. I don't want this to go too long because it's already very long. But there was a lot of information to go through, and I really think it's important for someone to raise their voice and talk about this, because there's so much nonsense about violence and like video gamers being murderers. Like that's what it sounds like in the newspaper, and that's totally wrong. And we need to speak up, about it, against it, because that's garbage. It's garbage in the media, and we need to, set it straight. Because just because um, some people play video games happen to be murderers doesn't mean that everyone who plays a video game is going to be a potential murderer and needs to be monitoring. So, anyways, the possible solution is to ensure people that have mentally fragile state, they need to get their medication, or they need to get people taking care of them, not to be like, their friends serving them food and, feeding them. Or like if it's that bad, like, I understand every once in a while there's one game that you really like, but I mean, if you're doing that on day in, day out, you're not going to school, going to your job, you probably have more problems than just, cooking meals or whatever. I mean, that should be kind of obvious, I hope. So, yeah, so if they get their medication and familial support, or support from their friend, proper support, not just like cook them a meal and then, help watch them play the game. I mean, get them out of the house, get them socializing with others, get them connected to the rest of humanity. Um, increase the awareness of unhealthy lifestyles. I mean, I like playing games, and I can play like Bioshock, using that example again. I can play for, I think the first or second one I played for a few hours, and that was rare for me. I just enjoyed it so much, but then I would take a break because I didn't want to beat the game in one sitting or two sitting, and then, there's my $60 gone. Um, but yeah, it's not good to game for hours and hours. And like in the case of this person that already had a problem, boozing is linked to causing more mental illnesses. Not exercising is also linked to a sharp increase in mental instability. Um, not enough sleep, as I need. I'm gonna get sleep after this. Um, yeah, gaming for hours and boozing endlessly is not good. Not ever sleeping. If you're staying up day in, day out, that's not good for your mental state. It's not good for your life. It's not good for you. You probably lose your friends. You probably lose a lot. So, um, and something I've personally seen unforced, and the one I've gone back to a few times already in this like 40 minutes I've talked. Strong restriction of selling games to minors is really important. I don't like seeing games that aren't meant for 11-year-olds use that example, or like 13-year-olds being sold to them when it's supposed to be for 17-year-old gamers that have maturity. You know, they've seen a lot more, experienced a lot more. So I mean, that's really important. I mean, and also don't believe everything the media says. You know, do some research. You know, challenge, use critical thinking, challenge what the media says, because there's a lot of garbage out there. And the articles I'm going to post at the end of this, they really seem very uneducated. I'm misinformed, I guess is a better way of saying it. So anyways, I'm pretty tired. I just want to get this out there. I want to see what you guys think about it. You know, sign up for our Twitter, sign up for the YouTube channel, you know, and remain active in Ottawa. And you know, come out to the events that we do, the Feast of the Dead. You know, the Let's Game Ottawa, you know, they're a lot of fun. You know, everyone's pretty much friendly in Ottawa. It's a very tight knit group. So that's really great to have. It's really um, positive too. So, anyways, I'm Jim from Just Push Play, Ottawa's video game web show. Take care, and until the next time, have a good night.